Okay, my name is Sipke. I'm from the Netherlands. I've been involved with Orchard for about 2 years now. First year I tried to create my own modules for my customers, which didn't went that well because I didn't know much about the API of Orchard. Simple things like creating your custom controller. Yeah, well, that's easy enough, but how do you integrate it in the theme? Once you know it, it's really simple. Like everything, you know, it's easy. So during this session, I will walk you through some of the must-know API features of Orchard, starting with integrating your custom controllers with the current theme. For this demo, I created a sample module. Initially, I wanted to build from scratch, but we don't have enough time to do that, so I'll walk you through it. Yeah, so we'll start with integrating with the current theme. For that, I created a custom controller. In many occasions, you would want to create a custom controller and maybe post back and forth and store the data into the database. Really basic stuff. But how do you do that in Orchard? What you see here is a simple controller. Nothing special. It doesn't contain anything about Orchard. When you run this.
Font size, increase the font.
Oh, it's too small.
You can fix it with the light to kind of wash it out.
Can you turn the light off right above the screen?
Yeah.
This is bad.
Let me see. I can do it from the light here.
You just go into editor and
Good?
Better.
Different one.
Better?
Not really.
Nope. Better?
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep
Keep going.
Yay.
Go black.
Better or not?
Last one. Better or not?
Yes.
Good. All right.
Yes. Okay. Great. Yeah. So I was launching this website. Oh yeah, the custom module is called harvest.orchard dev tool belt. It will contain all of the features that I'll walk you through. First thing is I created a contact phone controller, which we can access using the web browser. There it is, and that's the module name. Then we enter the name of the controller. Called contact form. So this is, when I started developing modules, this is what I got. It wasn't really nice. Well, you could of course create your own content type, but what do you do when you want to post something back? As it turns out, there's a really nice themed attribute, which you can apply on the class level or on the action method level. Like this. And when I refresh, you see now it's really simple. It's a really powerful feature. It's a must-know API feature. The same goes for the, extending the backend. Sometimes you want to customize the backend using your own controllers. There are two ways to do that. First way is to create a controller which starts with admin controller, which uses a convention that will automatically integrate the return views with the admin theme. Let's have a look at that. So right now I'm invoking the admin controller. You see, this is a custom view. It allows us to edit the contact form entries. Really basic. So that's it about integrating with the current theme. A big part of Orchard is, what's important to understand is how dependency injection works. It's important to understand the concept, and for Orchard it's really important that you know how to use that dependency injection mechanism. And as it turns out, that's also really easy. The way that works is, for example, I've created a, for example, let's inject a service that's an Orchard service. For example, when you post back the form, let's use the modifier service. So what I did here is I injected a notifier. Made a little typo here. And if you're not familiar with dependency injection, so you may be wondering what kind of object you will be getting here. Well, obviously it will be an inode, but you can't tell what the concrete implementation would be. But this interface is registered with the IOC container that Orchard uses, and the way it works is this interface actually derives from iDependency, and that's how Orchard registers all of the services or other classes in Orchard by scanning through all of the modules and registering the interface with the classes that implement that interface. If you go to the implementation of the notifier, we'll find a class called notifier. So this is the actual implementation. As you may have noticed, I'm using ReSharper features to quickly navigate and build up the code. ReSharper is a really nice tool to inspect Orchard and find implementations. It really helped me in understanding how Orchard works. It saves a lot of time. So let's use this modifier. I'm using a little extension edit here. If it works.
Can you move that up so it's scroll up, please?
Okay.
Other way. Scroll to the top of the screen.
Oh, sure. Okay, so this isn't working. Let's use the add method. Let's add a notification of type information. The second parameter of this notifier object is expecting a localized string, which is basically a delegate to a function, which is helpful when localizing Orchard. We'll have to create an instance of it, which we'll do in the constructor. So this is also, you'll see this throughout all of the modules in Orchard, that in the constructor a new localizer is invoked, or its instance method is invoked, and which is really just a delegate. So now that it's built, let's go to the contact form. And here you see the notification. So what we've seen here is dependency injection in action. Really powerful mechanism. It's perfect for modular applications as Orchard, like Orchard. I have a little script. I forgot to print it, so I have it on my phone here. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that, of course, if you have an interface, you can have multiple implementations of it. Sometimes you want a whole list of those implementations. The way you inject that is simply expecting an enumerable of that interface. So, for example, I created a little class here. I think it's in this file. Yeah, for example, the weather service provider, it's just an interface. We could inject a whole list of all of its implementations. And that's one button. That's how easy it is working with the dependency injection in Orchard. And it enables you to build really powerful, extendable applications. Because you could imagine, right now I'm talking about the weather service. It uses a provider mechanism. All of the other modules could implement a weather service provider interface and provide their own mechanism for retrieving weather information. It's really nice. Okay, so most of the applications, of course, is using data storage, data access. And when I first started with Orchard, I actually had to build a little form which entries needed to be stored in the database. I didn't know how to do it. Well, until I found out about the repository interface. In this demo, I created a couple of domain entities, if you will. They're called, imagine you have a recipe which contains a list of ingredients, and the recipe contains a category like Italian food or Italian recipes or French recipes. Let me quickly walk you through that model. Here I have an entity called recipes, really a pop-up class, but it has two requirements in order to be able to persist this into the database. First of all, it needs an ID property, and secondly, all the members need to be virtual, which is not really an Orchard requirement, but more of an Hibernate requirement. Because the way Orchard and Hibernate will generate proxies, do some things. Okay, so that's the recipe. If you will have noted that this recipe has a category property and a list of ingredients, and it's really interesting how you can map this with Orchard. The next thing you would have to do after you've created the entities, you will have to create tables. In Orchard, you have migrations, which has a nice API for creating the schema of your system. So let's have a look at the migrations. Here you'll see three calls to the create table method of the schema builder, which is a property of the data migration info class. And what's interesting to note here is that in order to map the category navigation property of the recipe class, Orchard is using a convention where you need to suffix the property name with the underscore ID. So this column will map to the category navigation property of the recipe class here. So what about this collection property? In order to map this, the ingredient class needs to have a navigation property to its parent class called recipe. So when we map the ingredient class to a table, right here, we'll have to include a column called recipe_ID. And well, that's basically it. You may have noticed that I'm also using a recipe category, which is an enumeration. And unlike Entity Framework and Hibernate supports enumerations, I'm not sure about the latest version of Entity Framework, by the way. It's really nice that it's supported. And to map that, you'll have to create a column of type string. Here. Oh no, I'm mistaken. It's actually a navigation property. It's not an enumeration. Yeah, it's another navigation property, so it's fine. Okay, so once this is set up, and the migration is running, we'll have created tables. I created a little unit test in Orchard to test this out, which is a nice way to also see how unit testing in Orchard goes. Writing unit tests in Orchard is really easy. There's a lot of code ready for you. There are a lot of stock objects and fake objects, and it's using mock for mocking interfaces and objects and dependencies. And what's really nice is there is a little class, or maybe it's not too little. It's a useful class called database enabled test base, and basically it enables you to create a temporary database, a SQL CE database, so that you can actually test the data access. So you don't have to fire up a browser and test your site. It's really easy this way to test your data model. So what I'm doing here, I'm setting up this test by resolving a repository. Here it is. In order to be able to do this, Orchard needs to be able to generate the database, and you need to override a method called database types, or its property database types, so that Orchard will know what tables to generate. This is really easy. Next, we'll new up a few entities. Create method of the iRepository interface will actually store the record into the database. And here we new another set of entities. We also added them to the database. And here we are flushing it, which will actually commit the changes. This is not required. This was really more an experimentation. And there we're getting the recipe back using the ID, and they were asserting that the ID was actually generated and that it contains one of the added ingredients. Maybe this is not the best of tests, but at least we know if it works or not by running it. So let's run this test. And it's green. So that's how iRepository works. Let's see it in action in our module. I've created a service class just to see how to inject an iRepository. As you've seen in the unit test, we're using the resolve method, which is another way to resolving interfaces into concrete implementations. We'll use our contact form service, and I'm mistaken. I evolved into using the conf manager, which we'll get to later. I have another service class here, a recipe service. This is here. We're injecting a repository of type recipe, and then we can invoke its methods like create, It has a table property which allows you to query for certain records using link, or just enumerate all of the records by calling a projection method like toolist. We can fetch records which will return multiple results. We can specify a predicate, which is a filter. And of course we can get a single item using the get method. To see all of the available methods on the iRepository interface. Just go to its definition, and as you see, it's a really simple interface. It just contains some straightforward methods and properties. Actually, I'm not seeing any properties here, so just like this. Oh yeah, here's a property. So that's basically it about iRepository. It's really useful. It enables you to implement that data access without using the content manager. Because if you're starting with Orchard, you want to have complete control. You want to try to understand how it works, and this is a great way to get started with Orchard and use the patterns and concepts that you're familiar with. Okay, so the next thing you will want to do in your module is customize this admin menu, and which is also really easy. What it requires you to do is create your own class and implement an interface called iNavigation Provider. It looks like this. I create a folder called Providers and a subfolder called Menu. By the way, you don't have to structure your folders the way I did. Most classes you can store them anywhere. It's a good practice, I think, to organize things a bit. There's one requirement regarding entities. I believe they need to be living in the model's namespace. I didn't test that, but I take that for granted. So the admin menu, the name is not required as long as it implements the iNavigation Provider. So implementing this interface is easy. You're required to return a menu name called admin, because Orchard will try to find all of the iNavigation providers whose menu name is admin. And then you'll have to implement the getNavigation method, which receives a builder argument, which has a nice fluent interface, which enables you to add menu items. And what's nice about this, and once again, what's nice about dependency injection, because this is a class, we can inject our own services or Orchard services and do things like what I'm doing here. I'm requesting all of the contact form entries so that I can include the number of entries in the title of the menu item. It's basic stuff, but it's nice to know that you are able to do it. Well, there's a method like link to first child, which, this menu item has a submenu item, and when you click it, it will actually invoke the URL of the child menu item instead of the parent menu item. That's what this method is for, link to first child. And yeah, this is also really interesting. Some people have asked how you could create this tagged interface. Actually, this is a child menu item of the contact form item, contact form menu item. But because of this local enough method that's being invoked, it will set a property to true, so that Orchard will know to render the submenu item in the form of a tab. So, really simple, really easy. But yeah, you have to know about it. Same goes for this add image set method. If you want to customize this icon, all you have to do is invoke add image set, specify a name, and Orchard is using a convention where it will include a style sheet based on this name. The convention is that the style sheet needs to be named menu dash name that you specified dash admin. And of course, you need to create such a style sheet in your module. So, well, that's it about the integration provider. Yeah, ad hoc shapes. Shapes can be really difficult to get your head around when you're starting developing with Orchard, or even if you're creating themes. But there are quite good tutorials and documentation on creating drivers which emit shapes. But what's maybe not what you may not know is how to create ad hoc shapes. Shapes are used really to render anything from using templates. So shapes are really cool things once you understand them. What I'll show you now is how to create a ad hoc shape without using a driver. I will show you from what places you can instantiate shapes, which is basically any place where you can enter code. And understanding this enables you to create really useful modules or customize your themes or modules. It's really great. So what I did for this demo, I created a little weather shape, which basically shows today's weather using a service. It's called weather. This is just a template, but it will be used if you instantiate a shape called weather. It will use this template to render. So let's try this out. Let's, for example, let's render the shape in the aside second zone of this page or of this theme, using the index view of our our contact form controller, like here. So here we're in the template of our contact form, and here we can enter some code. And to access the zones in the theme, you have to access the root shape, which is called layout, and that one directly contains all of these zones that are specified in the theme. So you should, in practice, you should not depend on the existence of certain zones in the theme, because your modules should work with any theme, right? So this is just an example. So let's add a new shape to the aside second zone. The aside second zone, zones are shapes, so you could add a shape to any other shape. To create a new shape, to instantiate it, we'll use the new property of this field. And it may be interesting to know that the new property is actually just a shape factory, which is responsible for creating shapes. So we can enter anything here. So right now I'm instantiating a weather shape. You could also call it anything else. It will just create a shape with that name. So let's see what this does. Okay, so we saw something appearing here. Weather service is temporarily unavailable. Well, that's correct, because if we look at the template, what we're doing here is quite interesting. We are asking for a weather info property on the model, and the model in this template will be the weather shape, right? But where does this information come from? What you can do in Orchard, you can implement a class which implements the iShape table provider, and it contains a few methods which are executed right before a shape is to be rendered and right after. And it's a perfect place to inject any data that you want, like data that comes from services or databases or whatever. Let's have a look at that. So I have a folder called shapes, and I have a weather shapes class. And as you see, it's implementing the iShape table provider, which contains a couple of members, like discover, just discover. So that's the one method you need to implement. And what you get here is you say build an argument, and it allows you to basically attach events to certain shapes, and which shapes you want to attach event handlers, or not really event handlers, but conceptually they're like events. You enter the name here, like in this case weather. We're expecting to render a weather shape, and this onDisplaying method expects a lambda. And this is the place to invoke your services, like in this case our weather service, which is again injected using constructor injection. And yeah, this will store today's weather information into a property, which doesn't really exist until right now because we are declaring it here. So that's really nice about dynamic objects and shapes in this case. But it said weather service temporarily unavailable. That's because if you go to the admin, I created this weather service as a feature of Orchard, of the module. Like here, it's called harvest weather. It's not enabled, but it's enabled. So now it's enabled. The way you implement this is you can define features in the module manifest, in module.txt, and it's defined here. And how you can attach these features to your classes using an Orchard feature attribute, and it's used by the IOC container or by Orchard, and depending on the features that are enabled, it will select the classes and register them with the interfaces, only for the enabled features. So that's really great, because if you didn't have this feature, then all of the classes would have been registered with the IC container, which may not be really good for performance. And it's also great for the user to be able to enable or disable features. So right now it's enabled. Let's see what it does now that it's enabled. Yeah, so, okay, so right now we're seeing two shapes, and that's because I have actually that's another topic. So let's talk about it now. It's in FSC3 we have action filters, which are little pieces of code that you can implement in the form of an attribute, or you can use a global filter, and it's code that will be executed on each request in a certain point of the page lifecycle. And in Orchard we have a similar feature, but the advantage of the Orchard implementation is, once again, it's a class where you can inject your own services. So here we have the there's a folder called filters. I've created a weather filter, which inherits from filter provider. So that's another key API feature of Orchard. We're also implementing the iResult filter, which is an MVC interface, so that MVC will execute this code when the action result is executing. And what we're doing here is we're accessing the work context property of another key feature of Orchard, which is the Orchard services interface. This is a really simple interface, but it's really useful because it contains certain properties and services that you will be using a lot when you're developing modules, like the content manager, the modifier, maybe authorizer, etc. And it includes the work context, which you can compare a little bit with the HTTP context, except for the fact that it's wrapping that property and it contains other useful information regarding the current request, including the layout property, which gives us access to the layout shape, which
which will be rendered. So we can also access the zones that are part of that of the layout. So that's the reason we're seeing two shapes here. So let me. You see that we are using the Orchard feature here. If I remove this, if I remove this line, it will not add the second shape. Oh yeah, let me remove this from the index view. Here. Let me remove it from this one here. Let me remove this. Because we implemented this as a filter, it will execute on each request. So that also means this shape will be rendered not only on this page, but on every other page. Which may be useful in certain cases. But once again, you should not rely on the existence of zones in a TV from your module. You see, so right now we see the shape on every page. Yeah. Oh yeah. So right now we added a shape to another shape, the zone in this case. Sometimes you'll add a shape to your view model or another shape, and you don't want to add it to another shape, you want to render it. So for that, what you have to do is just render it using the display method. This is really useful for theme authors as well. Like display, new, first shape. And you see, I'm not specifying any parameters. We could specify some arguments, like maybe date. Maybe we want to see the weather forecast. We could specify here some properties. If we implemented that in our service, which we didn't in this case, but it's nice to know that you can specify attributes as well, which will be part of your model in the template here. So that's about it about shapes in this demo. Okay, the next key Orchard API feature is the content manager, because Orchard is all about content. So it has a great API to work with content. For this demo, I created well, you've seen it. It's a list of entries of the contact form. We could have stored this as simple entity classes, but instead I chose to implement them as content items because that has certain advantages, like you can integrate with all sorts of other features of Orchard, like the rules engine or the content editor. In this case, when I want to view the details, it's easy to attach title part, body part, etc. And that's I'd really recommend to create content items instead of just entities, unless it makes sense to create just an entity, of course. Most of the times, it's best to create a content type using your custom parts. In this case, I also created a custom part called contact form entry part, which contains the sender names and the email. Yeah. So how does that work? If we go to the front end, and we can enter this, we can fill out this form and submit it, but we want to have it appear here. The way we can do that is using the content manager. So let's see how that works. Oh, I forgot about this admin attribute, because I'm not actually using this admin controller. I wanted to show you that for more advanced modules, you may need more admin controllers, and of course you can only have one admin controller with that name. So in those cases, you can use the admin attribute, which will basically do the same as what if you would have used the admin controller as the name of the class. So in this demo we're using this controller. It has the admin attribute, and yeah, here we see the first. Actually, it's using our content form service, which in turn is using the content manager. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, so here we have a store entry method. So this method is invoked from the controller, and it will new up an entry. This is some sort of a helper method here. And here it's using the content manager, which is a property of the iOrchard services class. But we could have injected iContent manager directly. It doesn't matter. It will be the same instance. And what this content manager has is a new method, and this will new up, if you will, new content item of type content form entry, which is a content type registered with Orchard. It's defined in the database using migrations. And second lines will pass the new content item to the parts that it has, so that I can set some properties to it. Basic stuff really. And to actually store this into the database, like using a repository, you need to call the create method of the content manager, and that will actually create the content item into the database. It has a few overloads like version options, which will allow you to either save it as a draft or as a published item. And that's basically those are basically the important features about content manager. Of course, you also need to be able to query content. For example, in this list, the way we can list content items of a certain content type is using the query method, which will return. It accepts a content type names params or a string array of content type names. In this case, we just want content form entry, and this method returns. If you can see it here, it's returning a iContent query, so it will not execute immediately. It will give you a chance to filter down. For example, in this method, we want to find content items by title, and that's interesting to have a look at. You see here we invoke a query. It will. It's using a Fluent interface. In this case, it will filter down by title part, so that we can filter on the title. So this is really nice to play with and see what it can do. And then we project it to a list. To a list which would return a list of title parts, but well, this method requires us to return content item, so here we're selecting the content item of the title part record. So that's basically it about content manager, or that I have to say about content manager. I think it has a lot of more stuff. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the interface of the content manager. Yeah, so it has a lot more methods like content type definitions. It's really the interface into the content management system of Orchard, or in a programmatic way. Yeah, you can publish items, unpublish, etc. Export even. Yeah, it's pretty useful service, of course. Another really important feature of Orchard is content handlers. That it's a bit more advanced for most users, for most developers, because it can be tricky to understand where it fits in. Well, actually, a content handler is really simple. It's once you understand this, you've probably seen it when you're creating your own drivers, because in order to store your custom parts, you need to implement a content handler, and in the constructor you typically add a storage filter, even though you may not know what it does exactly. So you've probably seen this, but the content handler can do much more. If you go to its definition, it implements the iContent handler interface, and it has a whole bunch of methods which you can, well, conceptually view as events regarding a content item. I'll show you an example in a minute. Actually, for example, here the build display method. It's when you invoke this, you can, if you implement it in your own content handler, you could override the implementation of how the default one works. For example, there's an implementation that will actually run through all of the content parts of a content item and invoke each build display method of these drivers. I don't know the name of that handler, but it's somewhere there. But it's nice. The reason I'm telling this is so that you get a little bit of a more clear picture how drivers work in Orchard, because I think that's really interesting. Yeah, so I'd also like to mention this filter. To me, it sounds really mysterious. What is a filter really? The way I see it is it enables you to create reusable pieces of logic that you can add to the filter property of a content handler. So in this case, we're using a storage filter. There's also an activating filter, which we'll discuss in a minute. And you could create your own filter, so that you could, for example, we have a lot of methods here, and typically a filter has some of these methods. So if each method can have has a filter. Maybe there's not a perfect method, but most of these methods have a corresponding filter, which allows you to create reusable pieces of logic, which may come in handy someday. Yeah. So one of the interesting methods of a content handler is to get item metadata. And you may be wondering what is item metadata? Well, it's metadata about the content item, and it's used in cases like, for example, if you go to the view template of this view, it's called index. Hold on. Here I'm invoking an HTML helper method. Well, you see, it's called item edit link with return URL. Basically, what it does is it renders an hyperlink which points to the content editor of the specified content item, which we're passing in here. This is a contact form entry content item. If you look at its implementation, it's called an item editing, which in turn is using the content manager get item metadata method. And this method will invoke all of the iContent handlers, so that each handler will have a chance to populate the metadata, item metadata object. And this method is interested in the edit routes values. So certain content handlers can override this this property. And there's an implementation in the core contents module, which will use this to specify the correct route when you want to edit a content item. Because if you see here, if you go to details, it will actually go to the contents module, or the admin control of the contents module. And it's not hard-coded or anything, it's used by contents module, which I put there.
Here it is, contents handler. And you see this is also just a content handler, and it's overriding the get content item metadata method, and here it's setting the correct area, which is the name of the module, the admin controller, etc. So this should give you a little bit more, a better picture of what a content handler is used for. It's about.
Well, of course, it's about content and events regarding content. There's a whole lot of there's a lot more to say about the content handler because it has a lot of features, but I think the idea should be clear. So I mentioned the activating filter, and when you are developing a custom module, you may want to override or maybe extend the user with maybe some profile information, like a Twitter alias or whatever that's required. What you would do is create a part, like the profile part, and you would have to attach that part to the user content type. Now, you could do that using a migration, of course. You can attach parts to content types, but there's another way to attach content parts to content types, and that's using the activating filter. So let's see how that works. So what I did, I created a use profile part handler for the user part that I created. And basically the use profile part is really simple content part. It contains a Twitter alias property. And here I'm adding an activating filter. And the implementation is really interesting. It's really simple. Let's see, we'll see in a minute what it does. The constructor of the activating filter requires the name of one or more content types. What will happen is when a content item is activated of the user content type, it will invoke a activating event, which is handled using a content handler, or in this case, the activating filter. And this is basically the implementation. If it matches the content type to a well-bound specified content part to that content item, and the result is when I create a new user, this one, for example, Jake, it has an extra field which you can edit from the admin, which is nice to know about. Okay, so well, we're talking about users now. It may be interesting to know about custom roles. Of course, you can create new roles, and roles really are nothing more than a name with a set of active permissions. Let's have a look at that. For example, here we have a few roles. I created a harvester role, and I implemented two custom permissions. And the way you create custom permissions in Orchard, once again, it's just a matter of implementing a class, which I did here in the security folder. It's a class called harvest permissions, and what's important is that you implement the iPermission provider. And the iPermission provider contains a get permissions method, from which you're expected to return the permissions that you want to show to the user, so that the user can attach the permissions to the role. And there's another method called stereotypes, which allows you to assign the custom permissions to certain roles. And the nice thing about this is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this will cause the harvester role to be created automatically. There's some handler somewhere, or some other class that will create this role. So you don't have to create a role from the migration. So that's really easy. But the interesting part is, how do we enforce these permissions? For example, the manage contact form entries. How do we enforce that? Right now, if I go to contact form, I'm admin, so I can access anything. But what if I sign in as a different user, for example? If I make Jake not an administrator, but let's say I wanted to allow harvesters to access the admin panel. I'd go to the harvester role. Then I'd say, yeah, you can access the admin. Stay. Now I'll try to log in as Jake.
So I'm logged in as Jake. I can access the contact form entries. But actually I want to allow Jake to access the admin, but I don't want him to manage the contact form entries. So I want to make sure that he's not allowed to do that. So let's log in back as an admin. Let's verify that the permissions are not set. It's not set, so but still he could access the contact form menu item. So let's prevent that. The way we do that is, first of all, we want to hide the menu item. So we go back to our admin menu. And instead of adding this menu item, we will first check whether the current user has a permission to manage contact form entries. And that's another key API feature of Orchard. It's the authorizer, which will inject. Which has an authorize method, and it returns true if the current user has access. For the specified permission, false otherwise. So let's specify the permission that we created. In the harvest permissions, I created two permissions here as static properties. One called manage contact form entries, and the other one. Right now we're going to check for this permission, the manage contact form entries. Which really is just an instance of a permission object, which is a really simple object. It just contains a few properties describing the permission. So let's check for it. I think it's called harvest permissions. So if the user doesn't have permission, doesn't have this permission, will just return and do nothing. Of course, we need to add an if statement.
Oh, I was already injecting this. So let's move on. Now if we refresh, you should see this menu item disappearing, and it does. So that's how easy it is to enforce custom permissions. Of course, we don't want the user to be smart and try and access the the screen directly. So we don't want him to do this. So this should not happen, of course. So let's block this as well, which is really just as easy. here in the admin controller, in the index method, let's do the same check on this time. We will throw a new Orchard exception, Orchard security exception with a message stating that he doesn't have permission. So let's be explicit about it so there's no confusion. And because we're throwing an Orchard security exception, we will be redirected back to this access denied phase. So that's how easy it is, actually. You may have noticed that when I am signing in or signing out, here appears a notification which is not standard in Orchard. The way you can do this is by implementing the iUser event handler, which is a really nice interface. It enables you to handle events regarding the user. So you have a sample implementation which implements the iUser event handler. Once again, it's injecting some services that I require. The iUser event handler contains a few methods that you can implement, like when a user is being created, when it's logging in, when it's logging out, etc. So you can handle these events within your module. In this case, I'm just what I did here. When a user signs up, I want him to be added to the harvester role. The creative method is the perfect place to do that. Here I'm using the role service, which is another Orchard feature of the Orchard users, Orchard roles module. I'm just using a simple get role by name method. I'm looking for the harvester role. I'm checking. I'm doing a test here because the user may have deleted the role, of course, so you need to handle that case. And here I'm assigning the user to the harvester role simply by accessing the user roles part record repository. There's no method in the role service, so probably because it's so easy to do it like this. You just have to assign the role and the user ID. And that's really it about user event handler. But what's interesting is the mechanism that's used. It's using a pattern called, or maybe it's not a pattern, it's a practice. I'm not sure what the correct name is, but it's the event-bus pattern. Well, that's a pattern. And it's a really powerful mechanism, and it's used throughout Orchard. If we go to the implementation, the definition of the iUser event handler, you'll notice that it's deriving from iEvent handler, which has no members. It's just what you call a marker interface, but it's implemented by a lot of classes. You see, there's a whole list of classes that implement directly or indirectly or rather indirectly the iEvent handler. And what it allows you to do is to expose events from your module, which other modules can act upon, and that's really key to create extendable modules. Let me quickly show a sample implementation because it's really simple. For example, here I've created a contact form event handler with I came up with two methods, like creating and created. So that, for example, I wanted to create some filters, like a spam filter, and maybe some other default actions. So I've created a contact form event handler and created two implementations. Called the default contact form handler, which doesn't do much except for showing a notification to the user that a new form entry has been created. And the other implementation, a little bit more interesting, yet simple. It's a spam filter, just to demonstrate that how the event bus system works. So the way this works is in our contact form service, we're injecting a contact form event handler, not a list. You could inject a list of it, like the IEnumerable, but the event handler is a special case. Orchard is using some smart mechanism that allows you to inject a single instance, and when you invoke a member of this instance, it will invoke members of all of the instances of all of the implementations of the contact form event handler. And using it is really simple, of course. For example, here I've created a snippet. I think it's that one. Because yeah, it's simple, but it requires some code. No, that's not the one. Yeah, here it is. This is old. I'm using a little pattern here, creating a context class. It's nice because I can easily extend this class with more properties if I need that in the future. But it's about this line here. Here I'm invoking a method and it's passing in a context, and then I'm actually creating the content item here. If it's not being cancelled, that's nice about this pattern. You can cancel or do what's suitable for your case and act upon that. Let's see this quickly in practice. Let's set a breakpoint. Let's build this first. So let's go to the content form. Let's also set a breakpoint in the event handlers. Here I have a spam protect content form here, and default one here. Actually, I need to attach the debugger first. Let's try again. Okay, so it's started testing. Well, we're running out of time, so I'm sure that you get the idea. Yeah, we're running out of time. I had a few more. Yeah? Okay. Oh, actually, these were optional. It's about HTML filter and a little bit about caching, but no, I think it's good because that will take much more time to really Q&A. Sorry?
Questions?
Sure, yeah. Are there any questions?
Perfect. I'm just going to pass the mic.
Yeah.
Jacob.
Earlier you were talking about how to display the query with Content Manager.
Yeah.
Quick question, I've actually seen a lot of people asking that question on the forum. How would you query two content parts, unrelated content parts? Like if we want to grab, see if anybody from that content list is actually a user. So we want to query both content parts and join it by, let's say, email address.
Oh, sure. Actually, I've not tried it before, so I'm not sure if that would work. Let me quickly check if what happened if we try that. So let's go to the. You know the answer? So please enlighten us. Because that's an interesting question. I don't know it from the top of my head.
Yeah, so you can't. No, you can. Yeah. So there is no Orchard way to do that, but you can use a HQL query in an Hibernate. You can use another API from an Hibernate to do your querying by yourself, because there is no way that the part knows another one. But you know they have that. So you can do the query for Orchard. So HQL, which is a string-based query in an Hibernate, I criteria, and with an Hibernate 3, so the 1.6 version, you will be able to use query over, which is like link everything in objects, but you will be able to do charges with that query over 1.6 because it's an Hibernate 3. Oh. No question from you?
Any other questions?
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. By the way, I like your tutorial on the sidewalk. I think that is very nice.
I'm sure you can do some signs after if you want some custom signs.
Yeah, sure.
Photographs and pictures with him. You want a picture with him? I can take the camera.
I have two questions. You talked about the repository. That's for querying the basic entities that you create.
Exactly.
And you use the content manager for querying the content items.
Exactly. Yeah.
From design point of view, when would you do a content item? When would you do just basic entity?
Basically, if you want to make your data extendable or reusable, I'd say it totally depends on your scenario, of course. I'd say go with content items because it's really flexible and it enables you to do things like, for example, if a content item is published or created or deleted, whatever, you can, for example, attach, create rules for that, or you can publish the content items. You can use the default editor, the content editor, so you can integrate with other parts within Orchard. So it totally depends on your scenario, of course. But most of the times, I'd say go with the content item. Unless you're uncomfortable with that, you could always start just using your own entity. Just you're playing a domain entity. Well, another advantage of using content items is that you can attach content fields. So you could create a simple entity and create some properties for it, or you could implement it as content fields, so the user can change some properties about it. So it really depends on your scenario.
That's kind of one of the bigger questions I had in my Cambridge here also. I don't know if this is the time to answer that or not.
Okay, we could also just
the panel.
Yeah, the panel.
Yeah,
We'll bring it back up.
okay.
To the panel.
I'll ask it then.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have another question?
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.